Sahana Vavatu, Sahana Vavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Sahan Viryam Paravavahai, Tejasvinavaditamastu, Avidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us, may he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Peace, peace, peace. Good evening.
Yes, good evening.
We're still in the chapter called Way to the Blessed Life by Swami Abedin. And we are on page 142. Shall we begin?
Yes, where would you like to begin?
We're beginning at the top of the page. The moment we come to know...
Oh, I need a pen. I'm so sorry, Swami. Yeah, I can see
I
that.
don't know if I've got one. Let's see.
All right. Thank you.
The moment we come to know that we are living like the slaves, that very moment we begin to feel the effects of slavery in our life and seek the company of those who are free and blessed. Then we struggle for emancipation and deliverance from the bondage of ignorance. Whatever we want sufficiently, we shall surely obtain. Who is responsible for our present slavery? We ourselves are slaves because we have bound ourselves hand and foot by our own desires. If we want to conquer them, we can do so. We must not blame another person or God or Satan for our slavery, but we should blame ourselves, only ourselves. If we seek freedom and happiness, let us struggle hard enough for them, and we shall surely attain to them. This freedom is the highest ideal of all philosophy and religion. What did Jesus say? He said, quote, "And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free," unquote. That's from John 8, chapter 8, verse 32. What is that truth, and what kind of freedom did he mean? We read the Bible, but we do not understand the true meaning of these words. We read the Bhagavad Gita, but we rarely get into the real meaning of the lines. Our eyes are covered with ignorance. Therefore, we do not see things as they are. Mere reading will not bring knowledge of the absolute truth and freedom. That knowledge will come when we really desire it and strive after it.
Well, here's an interesting little footnote. And we'll just do it lightly like a stone skipping over the water, Swami. Life is so amazing. One of our devotees, father, was an Afrikaner. That means Dutch descent after many hundred years. I think they came in the 1600s to South Africa. And he told me that his dad had become a preacher. And I jumped in, as I often do, and I say, "Oh, I know." And I gave the name of the church. It's an adjunct of the Presbyterian Church, actually, Calvinist. Called it Reformed. And he came up with a pun and said that his father, at a fairly advanced age, they do that in the Episcopal Church, maybe 40, he'd been a farmer and so on, became an Episcopal priest, the only Dutchman, if you will, or surely on record that did so, and was under the diocesan supervision of Bishop Tutu. And wouldn't you know it, when Bishop Tutu was remanded to the mainland after many years on Robben Island looking without knowing if he'd ever set foot in his beloved Cape Town again. This man's father, this devotee's father, became the preacher, was the preacher. And without waffling or dissembling or superficializing or misreading, he did offer to Nelson Mandela, a man of incredible stature and evolution, the concept. Remember, this was not ineffective, nor was it just superficial. The concept that he was offering freedom. That is to say, Christ was offering freedom. And was offering it, of course, as an adjunct to knowing the truth, capital T. Oh, there's more to it than that, in that when Nelson Mandela was freed, he was supposed to come by a certain circuitous route, but knowing that it would be unsafe, our friend's parents, and the mother was a saint, were watching, and Dad was watching on TV, and Mother ran out into the street because she realized they were coming by their house. She's standing there waving her handkerchief. So the ensuing life of this man, we saw him at the Parliament of Religion in Cape Town, and yes, he was a man of great authenticity, authority, as it says of Jesus, power, faith, wisdom, strength, everything. He was at the Parliament. He was kind of like the showcased. So I would like to assume that he had then seen freedom after some 26 years or something altogether, and that he understood the meaning of the words. And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. In Vedanta philosophy, this freedom is called mukti, M-U-K-T-I in italics, or moksha. Probably a slight distinction there, but moksha is definitely the freedom of the soul. It means emancipation from the bondage of selfishness and all other imperfections. Vedanta philosophy does not speculate, nor theorize, nor give any artificial scheme of salvation. It describes the conditions of our present life and shows the way to freedom. There's another one of those sentences, just light up in the dark. And shows the way to freedom. It does not ask anyone to accept anything because it is written in this or that book, but tells him to find the cause of his slavery and to remove it, the real and the apparent. And searching for freedom and the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness in the spiritual places. When the cause is removed, the effect is also gone. Fascinating combination between cause and effect in Vedanta. I never thought of it this way. Swami Vivekananda, very quickly as he discusses these things, points out that you start with a cause, and it has an effect, and then that effect becomes the cause of a new cycle, kind of Hegelian. Yeah, very interesting. So, proper diagnosis is absolutely necessary for the successful cure of a disease. Slavery is the result, and everyone has this, of a diseased mind, and the cause of that disease is ignorance, or the non-realization of our true life, in which there can be no suffering and no misery. And guess what India brought just recently? course, he's been doing it for a long time, but because on to 1893, and even before that, Carlyle was touched, Emerson was touched, believe it or not, Jefferson and John Adams were touched by the Bhagavad Gita. Guess what India brought us? In that true life, eternal happiness reigns supreme.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now it can be asked as to where shall we find that true life? Shall we have to go into a cave or a forest or a desert to find it? No, it is dwelling within the cave of each individual heart, and we must search within. Our real life is the background of our apparent life or ego. It is called by many names. Some call it God, the Father in heaven. Some call it the blessed life, while others call it the soul of our souls, which is the Atman. The difference is only in name. The dualists call that truth God because they look at it from without. But those who look at that truth from within call it the Atman, or the self, or the true spirit, or the divine nature of man.
Self with a capital S.
According to Vedanta, this true life is one, although its expressions are many. When it is looked at through the conditions of time, space, and causation, it appears as the sun, moon, and stars, and also as all phenomenal forms. They are nothing but so many expressions or appearances of that one being, with a capital B, which is the true life. They exist as such in relation to our mind, and the true life is behind the mind. True life is unchangeable, but the mind is subject to change. Out of mistake, we think that mind is all in all, but there is something within us much more subtle and much more important than what we call the mind. This something is expressing itself through the changeable medium of the mind, the functions of which, as everyone knows, are constantly changing. Our intellect grows and our understanding grows, or is subject to growth. But does the life grow? No, life is always life, and there is no growth in it. From less life, it cannot grow into life. But the condition through which the life force manifests change and grow.
Conditions.
The conditions, yes. We can generally mistake the growth of the body for the growth of life. The body grows because it is subject to growth, but life itself is unchanging, free, and divine. It may be asked if our true life or the divine nature is within us. It is not self-contradictory to say that we are. Is it not self-contradictory to say that we are living as slaves? If it be true that we are living as slaves, must we not admit that our true life or divine nature is a slave too?
Why don't I pick up at that one?
Okay.
This question was asked by the seekers after truth in ancient times. Ancient times. Ancient times in India means prehistoric. I just love the fact, discovered it only fairly recently, that Neanderthal man, 60,000 years ago, they think, about the time that the Aborigines, so-called, were bebopping down the coast of India and so forth over to Australia. They say 70,000 years. The scientists say 60,000. When the Parliament was there, of religion in Melbourne, they agree. So about that time, they also were doing cave paintings. Oh, nothing like the magnificent artworks of the Cro-Magnon men. But nevertheless, who I think probably were the ancestors of the Basque people. It's interesting. Because the Basque people, their chromosome, Their language is related to no known language, and their chromosomes, the Rh factor, is thrown backward like the Native American, no connection there particularly. And so why not? They probably were much more widely distributed in Europe at one time, the Cro-Magnon men, and then were pushed by the invading people into the Pyrenees, basically. And France has them, and no doubt Spain. So they did paintings of animals. Hey, art is speech. Art is writing. 60,000 years ago. And when are we, well, the script which we know as Devanagari is actually, believe it or not, related to Hebrew. It looks a lot more like Hebrew than it does Greek, right? The Indian script. And it's called Brahmi. You look up in Webster's dictionary, yep. And it arrived, I don't know, I'm going to say 1000 BC. Whenever we started the cuneiform writing, that was very late in the day. So way under all that stuff, the Indians are reciting the scriptures. Family has a responsibility to get it letter perfect, a certain part of the chant. And so when they talk about ancient, they mean a long time ago. And so it says this question, you see, if we're living as slaves, must we not admit that our true life or divine nature is a slave too? I'm not quite sure where I started.
Yeah,
so.
yeah,
Right there. Yeah, okay. This question was also asked by the seekers after truth. That's in ancient times. The sages of India knew that the true nature of man is free, divine, and perfect. They answered this question by saying it is the mind which is the cause of slavery and bondage, and whenever we shall go beyond the mind, we shall be free. The mind alone makes one act as a slave, and it is also the mind that leads one to perfect freedom. That is, when the mind is imperfect and is attached to the conditions of phenomenal existence, that means the movie that we see out there, the sense experiences, it keeps the soul in bondage. But when that mind is purified, it is freed from all delusions and learns to go below the surface of things and begins to discriminate the eternal from the non-eternal, the real from the unreal, the true life from the apparent life, and blessedness from unblessedness, and thus becomes the means of attaining freedom. It makes us realize what is behind the mind, and I call it that cascading waterfall, which India has brought into the Western world's awareness, called superconsciousness. We spent a lot of time with Abedin on all those three states of Western awareness of consciousness, waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep. That's what the psychologists study to the extent that they do. But here comes India with God country. Here comes India with the reality, the waterfall, the fountain, this huge cascading superconscious dimension, which is the engagement of spiritual life. It makes us realize what is behind the mind and brings the ego back to the center of truth from which it proceeded.
As long as our mind is imperfect, we are far away from the central truth of blessedness. The tendency, however, in each ego is to go back to the center. Most of the modern thinkers say that life is a struggle with the environment, but they do not tell us the object of this struggle. Is it without purpose? No. We are struggling constantly with the environment to get back to the center from which we started and to break down the walls of selfishness. This struggle will end when the mind is purified. After passing through the various stages of evolution, each ego is bound to attain to freedom. We must not struggle for it now, but sooner or later, we may not struggle for it now, but sooner or later, according to the experience which we have gathered, the struggle for freedom and perfection must begin for us. We have come to this world to gain experience. By experience is meant the manifestation of latent powers and also knowledge of the results which proceed from it. A child is born with an undeveloped mind, and its wisdom is also underdeveloped. But we do not think that as it grows older, it gathers experience. But do you think that as it grows older, it gathers experience and knowledge entirely from without? No, the germ of divine knowledge is already within. If the germ contained no intelligence, it would be impossible for a child to learn anything. We cannot learn if we do not have a tendency to learn. We know that knowledge is nothing but the real property of our own souls. The external objects only give the suggestion which brings out that which is hidden within each soul. In trying to manifest the latent powers, each soul passes through the various stages of evolution and, after gathering experience in all, reaches perfection. Those who understand the process of evolution know how painful and tiresome it is to go through many incarnations. Of course, those who think that this life is the first and last chance for reaching perfection have some kind of consolation in the hope of going to heaven. But if they happen to fail in it, their condition is miserable. Are not such ideas childish and unscientific? Those who have gone a little deeper find that these are the mistaken notions.
Okay, let's just take a moment here and think about that, what we're doing. When he says that the external objects only give the suggestions which bring out that which is hidden within each soul, this is kind of like the scene, the drama. When he said just a line or two before that we're trying to break down the walls of selfishness. That is, let me just see if there was one other word about that. Well, yeah, walls of selfishness. Selfishness is really egocentricity, isn't it? And the ego is considered in some of the ways that Vedanta talks about how things seem to have appeared as the firstborn of ignorance. And that ego, if we remember that Sri Ramakrishna says you peel an onion looking for the center of it, there's nothing there. It's a mirage. And it's the one thing that keeps us really from worshiping at the altar of service to humanity. And guess what? It's Vivekananda who got off the soft bed that they gave him to sleep on in America and slept on the ground, really rolling at night in pain and anguish for the poor of India. It was Vivekananda who said at that altar, by expanding your concept of being from the false limiting concept of ego to include your neighbor as yourself, because your neighbor is yourself, and serving, worshiping, not my good man helping you, patting him on the head. There are lots of statues with Western people patting people on the head, kneeling. But no, expanding the loving kindness that they speak of, to realize that in the self of your sister and brother is also the God which is in you behind the mind, behind this little thing we call the ego. Well, let's just see how far it gets there. Of course, those who think, that this life is the first and last chance for reaching perfection. Did you read that? Those who've gone, where are we?
About in here somewhere.
The soul.
Or no, such ideals childish. I think that was.
Yeah.
Sentence
I'm
after
sorry,
that.
brother. Show me those kids.
Those.
Okay, I think we're a little bit beyond it, but nevertheless, there you
Not
are.
much.
Those who have gone a little deeper find that these are mistaken notions. That's where we were. The soul existed before the birth of the body and will continue to exist after the death of the body, the Atman, that one shining infinity. What we are today is but the result of our past, and our future will be the resultant of what we are now. So karma yoga is not some kind of place of bondage. One has the freedom through karma of this very moment to start a chain reaction of cause and effect that are good, leading to freedom, don't you see? So each apparent life is one of the links in the chain of evolution of each individual soul. We may remain visible or invisible. We may remain as visible or invisible, and may go to a higher or lower plane according to the results of our desires. But each of these states is temporary and comparatively brief. Let's go, Swami.
This process of evolution will continue without cessation until it brings unto us that state where we become free from imperfections, sorrows, miseries, etc. This is a long and at the same time slow process. Therefore, Vedanta asks, if perfection be the goal of life, why should we wait so long? It says, let us attain more speedily to that goal and live the life of blessedness. Be happy from this day, and from this moment let us live as masters and not as slaves.
Baba.
Many people think that blessedness will come after death, in the grave. But they are mistaken, because after death, the life of blessedness or perfection comes only to those who have attained it in this life. Those who have not attained it here on earth will not attain it in the grave. We cannot win this state by good works, nor by a belief in a creed or dogma. Virtuous deeds do not produce it as their result. The state of blessedness unfolds itself in our souls when we cease to be wretched and do not mistake the unreal for the real.
Well, now you see, that's the whole thing right there. So, we could turn out the lights and close up shop for the night. It's a question about churches and open doors and why they have the doors open. I kind of have a feeling, that unless something really is going on inside, maybe they just as well get a couple of 2x4s and put over the front door and close up shop. It's quite a thing. Because everything is relevant. Everything can become relevant to the soul that is searching for freedom, which is not only one's birthright, but is one's very existence. We realize there are some things that we have to deal with these days. I think some of us are beginning to have some major questions about that, because they are existential. They are as means to an end on the relative plane, the basis of the continued existence of the human species. I have been persuaded by the Protestant minister in the coterie, which has been magnificent, the Southern California Committee for the Pardon of the World's Religions, started here in January 2007. And Jeff Utter just actually eventually convinced me, who was not that much into action on the relative plane per se, like social action, that if we don't have environmental sustainability, this was some years ago, the human species will disappear. So you see, it becomes moot if, as Swami Brahmananda says, the reason we were born, the last sentence of the Eternal Companion, is to love God, to love and see God. Love God is to love Him. See God, Brahmananda points out that jnana yoga means light. One of the schools back east added on one of the first schools in Massachusetts, motto Veritas, truth. Huh? One of the preachers went bebopping off, founded a new college, and he added light and truth. Jnana is light, bhakti is love. We mentioned last time there are three major approaches in the Vedanta Society, right here in Southern California for that matter. And they're all Advaitist. The Pujarini doing the puja quietly inside at the noontime every day, with the aim of becoming one with God. The person that, as the gopis say, one of my very favorite phrases in the whole Bhagavad Gita, shepherdesses are saying, look, speaking of Krishna, there is Advaita dancing. And then the right on path of Jnana Yogi. They're all Advaitist. They all have the same goal. When Sri Ramakrishna climbed to the top of the mountain, and every path available to him at the time in India, including Christianity and Islam, he found that they were all the same experience on top of the mountain. So yes, there are different paths. But in the Ramakrishna Order of India, they are all Advaitist. So we find some interesting things. Looks like economics, that is, environmental sustainability is an essential need. It looks like we're not going to get there until we overcome systemic racism, which means unity. We got to work together. There's got to be union. Going to get this thing turned around, stop, reforest the Amazon. A fellow in Mississippi one time said to another fellow, he said, you know, God wouldn't let me into that church. I mean, the people wouldn't let me into that church. And God looked at him and said, African American, of course. He said, yes, I understand. They wouldn't let me into it either. So we've got quite a thing. And then, of course, a big clunker just fell on Mars yesterday. Wasn't it yesterday? Mm-hmm. Big clunker fell on Mars. And 2,000 pounder. And it's going to be looking for signs of ancient life. It's a very significant thing because on Mars, if there ever was, There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of it today. Well, my dears, if they find ancient signs of life on Mars, that's the first time they've sent up a spaceship to inquire into a deeply philosophical question. We don't need to go into it now, but it will expand the window of the world, the cosmos, the understanding of the very nature of the universe, into the minds of the great rivers of faith, of which I think primarily the Eastern spirituality, particularly of India, is the one that takes this seriously. Are you aware that Giordano Bruno, who for some of us is one of our greatest saints, a mystic, an early proponent of a life for the church bigger than that of officialdom and officialdom and bureaucracy and books, and maybe even, is this impossible? Seeing in the Bible itself a graven image? Thought when he looked up at the night sky and saw the stars that he was looking there at other worlds. Well, my brothers and sisters, the time has come. Yes, we must plant trees. And that is for the purpose of seeing and knowing and loving God. Take it away, brother.
Yeah, let's see. I was going to keep track of where we were, and now I've lost it. Let's see.
I think we're about, we cannot win this state by good works.
Oh, here we go. Mm-hmm. Virtue, yeah, there's another sentence or two beyond that. The state of blessedness unfolds itself in our souls when we cease to be wretched and do not mistake the unreal for the real. That was the last sentence we read. Virtue and ethical deeds help the soul by purifying the mind from all selfishness and other imperfections, and remove the obstacles that obstruct the manifestations of the divine powers. Thus, by doing good works, we prepare the mental field and bring about those favorable conditions under which alone the seed of the divine nature within can attain to full and perfect expression. When the mind becomes pure, it begins to discriminate the real from the unreal, the eternal from the non-eternal, the true life from the apparent life, and then it begins to feel the necessity for freedom and enters consciously upon the struggle to attain it.
I'll be with you, but it's just so fascinating. Yes, we're coming along. Two things are requisite for the attainment of the blessed life. First, we should understand the nature of the true life and realize the difference between the true and apparent life, along with their mutual relation. Secondly, we should struggle for freedom by withdrawing our minds from transitory things and fixing them on that which is eternal. In other words, we should be unattached to the non-eternal and love that which is eternal, thus causing our wretchedness to cease. Through love and love alone can the apparent life be united with the true life. Our life is determined by the things we love. If you tell me the thing you love and show me the thing you love, then you will show me your life, because we live in what we love. If we love the highest, we live on the highest plane. If we love the mere physical form, we are on the material plane. So try to find out which thing you love most, and then you will see where you are living. Let us try to love the highest. If you love the highest, you come nearer and closer to that eternal truth, which is the center of the universe. The blessed life will be achieved only through love. We cannot attain to that state of blessedness until we realize the unity of life, because blessedness consists not in separateness, but in oneness. The reality, capital R, of the universe is one. It cannot be many, although its expression may be multiform. If we understand the unity of existence, then we have attained the state of divine life.
Love means the expression of oneness. We are one with whatever we really love. Therefore, through love, we will reach the unity or blessedness.
That.
That unity or blessedness. And there's a footnote. It has been thus sung by Shelley, the mystical poet. I know that love makes all things equal. I have heard by mine own heart this joyous truth averred. The spirit of the worm beneath the sod in love and worship blends itself with God. Before we can love the highest, we must know it. Love of a thing is impossible without the knowledge of the nature of the thing. Therefore, knowledge of true life is the first thing necessary for the attainment of blessedness. When the apparent life or ego knows its real nature, it begins to love that which is unchangeable and one. What then becomes of the lower selfish life? It disappears when true life dawns, and that moment we become free from death, disease, sorrow, suffering, and pain, and reach blessedness. Then we are far beyond the reach of trouble and misery, just as the sun is always beyond the clouds. The clouds may hide the sun, but can never touch it. The soul of that man who has realized blessedness cannot be touched by the imperfections those proceed from
That proceed, perhaps?
Those, it must be something.
Which?
Yeah.
No, those. Which? That.
Yeah.
Huh?
Cannot be touched by the imperfections that proceed from selfishness. Must be
All right.
that. Then self-love changes into divine love, and one becomes conscious of the greatness and majesty of his true nature. Then one knows that all the powers of the universe have proceeded from the infinite source of powers which lies within each individual soul.
That's just okay. Which lie, I think. The infinite source which lies. That's right. That's okay. All right?
Mm-hmm. Then the soul of the apparent man rests in the unwavering repose in that one eternal being, or in the state of blessedness, and his body and mind work incessantly for work's sake, for helping others. Then he turns his love from the world to the eternal one. He reaches the blessed life. When he turns his love from the world to the eternal one, he reaches the blessed life. The life of such a man may be called a personification of all the blessed qualities that exist on that highest plane. When the fountain of blessedness is once opened, all the blessed qualities flow through him eternally. Such a soul or pure spirit is the embodiment of all the best teachings which the scriptures of the world contain. He becomes, then, the personification of the Sermon on the Mount. That blessed state was described by Jesus the Christ. He understood it and expressed it at every moment of his earthly life. He loved God. He lived in God and through God. he manifested the divinity. Each individual soul will eventually do the same. Jesus the Christ was not an exception, as is popularly understood. There cannot be any exception to the laws which govern the universe. Every so-called exception is a law. If Jesus attained to blessedness, we also can attain, and each individual soul will attain to that state of blessedness. If we cannot, then Jesus did not attain it. Such being the law, let us realize it in this life. Then all the actions of our life will be blessed like those of Christ.
My goodness, this blessed life is described in the Upanishads. Quote, the realization of the Atman, or the eternal truth within, produces a revolution within us. At that time, all the knots of desires for transitory things are torn asunder. All doubts cease forever. All questions are solved, and the soul becomes free, emancipated, and perfect. The Mundaka Upanishad. The way to such a blessed life is also described. That's the name of this chapter, Way to the Blessed Life. Vedanta says that realization will come through constant hearing, constant thinking, and proper meditation. So first of all, hear constantly and repeatedly that your true life is divine, immortal, and perfect. Constant hearing will bring before your mental eye this ideal, and then you will begin to feel it. Secondly, think of your present conditions and compare them with your divine nature. See where you are and how far you are below those highest ideals. Let each of your nerves and brain cells pulsate with the idea that your true nature is divine and free, and then you will get the result of thinking. Thirdly, concentrate. Remember, he said by hearing, Bhavajiva, that realization, he said, will come through constant hearing, constant thinking, and proper meditation. So, he said, the second one was, let each of your nerves and brain cells pulsate with the idea that your true nature is divine and free, and then you will get the result of thinking. Thirdly, concentrate your mind on that divine being, or on your true nature or life, whose reflection the apparent life is. Meditate on the central truth of oneness and unite the apparent ego with that perfect life or perfect nature from which proceed all blessedness, holiness, happiness, and peace.
Through this concentration and meditation, the blessed life or divine communion is attained.
Well, Swami, this has been quite a wonderful journey. You realize that through the Swami's, I think, wonderful fishing, excellent picking out this section and that, we have come from a starting point that would be very familiar to people in 1920. And since Swami Abedin was called by Vivekananda to please come, hurry, to the West, after Swamiji was here twice and gave a lot of time to the West, saying, as Buddha had a message for the East, I have a message for the West. Swamiji asked for two of his own disciples, Swami Bodhananda, Swami Paramananda, to come, but five of Sri Ramakrishna's own direct disciples came to the United States. Four of them traveled west of the Mississippi, came to Swamiji House in South Pasadena various times, lectured in L.A. for quite a while, different ones, and Sardananda stayed in the Boston area and lectured for quite a while to great effect as the successor to the immense impression, the immense experience that Vivekananda was and brought into their world of understanding in Massachusetts, and also Sardananda went to Brown University, which is the Rhode Island's big university of the early days. So he went to quite a few of them. So we have quite a story walking with Abedinanda, who for the past quite a few nights now has been back in India after 25 years and able to speak the language which they understand so well of the superconscious. And so we've come quite a road with him, including the Western understandings and then going beyond them. Swami, what are we going to do right now at the moment?
Well, there's a section called Spiritual Teachings of Swami Abedinanda. We could read a few paragraphs of that.
I think we should do that. I think we
Okay,
should probably
just have a few minutes here.
And I'd like you to begin us, if you will.
So I think these are kind of just, short little sections. So, yeah.
All right.
When the conviction that the Lord's will alone prevails is firmly planted in the mind, then we surrender ourselves wholly and wholeheartedly to that divine will, and perfect peace abides forever in our heart. The rare spiritual treasures that you desire to get cannot be gained all of a sudden in a day. The Puranas and other scriptures tell how the sages of old had to perform very hard austerities to get them. If you desire to have firm and unshakable faith and devotion to the Lord, you should also take to tapasya, hard austerities. Tapasya does not mean aimless wandering hither and thither. It really means regular and steadfast japa, meditation, and self-control. Want to read?
Yes, I think so. Keep your health by means of regularity in food and other ways. In places of pilgrimage, you cannot get wholesome food if you live on alms, and hence you're liable to fall ill. That is why we have established monasteries and hermitages. If you associate with the holy men living there and serve them, the impurities of your mind will be cleansed and you will become pure. As long as the mind is impure, it will be unsteady as well. When the mind remains unsteady, there will be no taste, no inclination to do japa or perform meditation. As at such times, At such times, engage the mind in doing japa and puja, serving the holy and reading the Gita and other holy texts. Puja is very important. It means actually the offering of food to the Lord every day at worship at noontime, which is then served by placing it in the offered worship food in the dishes of everyone at the table, God for them, within them, served to them by God, Brahma, Pranam. God is the offering, God is the recipient of the food, God is the action of offering. Such things engage the mind in doing japa and puja, serving the holy and reading the Gita and other holy texts, and also pray to the Lord with a yearning heart.
You can know from a study of the life of Sri Ramakrishna that we had to pray. That he had to pray intensely, weep bitterly, and yearn wholeheartedly before the Divine Mother granted her vision to him. If one pays with a
Praise.
yeah, that would make more sense. If one prays with a yearning heart to the Lord to get devotion and faith, he grants it. So pray in this way, quote, O Lord, be graciously pleased to bless me with unswerving devotion and unshakable faith. May my mind and heart be
Ever
attracted to thy lotus feet, and may it not wander from there in any other direction, unquote. The Lord is the Antaryaman, or the indwelling, and so he hears your prayers. And
that's Swami. It's very interesting. There's a slight distinction there. The Lord is
the Antaryaman, the indweller.
Yes.
And so he hears your prayers and blesses you.
Sit in the holy sanctuary every morning and evening. Repeat the name of your chosen deity, called Ishtadevata, 2,000 or 3,000 times, and pray. When the mind becomes steady in the process of japa, reverent repetition of the divine name, meditate on the form of the Lord. After that, do with devotion your duties. Always do the work you have to do with love and devotion and with your whole heart. This is tapasya, true austerity. If you do this kind of tapasya for 3 years consecutively, with regularity and steadfastness, your mind will become steady and pure, true. Afterwards, you will be fit for attaining your heart's desire, the realization of the Lord, seeing whom you will not need to see anyone else, and your lust and anger will be burnt out. We're getting close, Swami. We're within a minute of chime time. Give us a little bit, a sentence or two. Yeah.
Do you think so?
I think so.
Okay.
Just a little harder.
You write that you are being involved more and more in domestic affairs, and so you have no time for performing japa and other spiritual practices. I would advise you to do your work physically and keep up mentally the remembrance of God. Know and realize that the family is not yours, but the Lord's. There's supposed to be a period there?
Yep.
Let him do with it what he wills. When you attend to your children, look upon them as the Lord, and maintain the spirit that you are serving him. When you retire for sleep in the night, surrender the results of the day's work to the Lord and be at peace. Pray always to him for faith and devotion. If you live thus in the world, you will get peace and bliss.
That's it. That's right there. All right.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Peace, peace, peace.
Peace.